What up? Today, we're going to be doing a perfect offseason for the Pittsburgh Steelers. We are going to start this series on this channel. It's going to be me kind of jumping into the seat as the GM and going over the offseason and trying to build the team the best it can be in this offseason. So if you guys like this video, recommend me some more teams down in the comments to do, and I might look at those depending on how good this does. But with that said, let's go ahead and get started. So the Pittsburgh Steelers are in a spot where they are they're fine. They're okay, but they're not a contender. They're not going to be a contender next year. They're not going to be a contender probably the year after that, unless things go extremely perfect. And well, that's the goal of this video, is to get as perfect for this season and to get them as close as to next season to be a contender. This, like I said, this team's not going to be a contender this year. They're going to need more to go perfect than they have available to be a contender this coming year. I don't think they can be a real contender without a great quarterback. And Kenny Pickett is fine, and he's going to be the current future. But is he going to be the real quarterback of the future in Pittsburgh? So that's something we're going to figure out. But let's go ahead and get started with this. So the Pittsburgh Steelers have negative $4.8 million in cap room this offseason. And, that's something we're going to have to fix immediately because we got to have some money to make some moves with. So, ways to relieve the cap. You can restructure contracts. You can cut bad players on contracts, extend players who may be eligible for extensions, which that's kind of a particular thing. We don't have anybody on the roster right now who's really in that spot. That's actually the reason why a guy like Darius Slay might get traded, is because he needs a extension so he can make more money for himself, but it'll spread out his cap number for the next few years and make it easier to manage on the team. Make trades for cash amounts or picks, which we're not going to do in this video, and then we can carry over and use space if you have it, which we don't, but that's just all the ways that the cap can come about. Omar Khan, the GM of the Steelers, is a cap wizard. That was his job before he became the Steelers GM this past season. So he really knows how to manage that, and the cap is very manipulative. So it's manipulatable, I guess. So it's something we can work around. But with that said, we're going to go ahead and work on that. We're going to restructure these guys right here. Minkah Fitzpatrick, we can save about $10 million on him if we just restructure his contract. So we're going to do that for sure. And then TJ Watt is going to save us $12.6 million, and then Cam Hayward $7.34. This is all just by restructuring their contracts. That right there will save us about $20 million total, $30 million, excuse me. But we're also going to throw in James Daniels and Chukwuma Okorafor restructures. Those will both save us between $3 and $5 million, I believe. So with that said, we will save a total of $36 million, and our cap balance will now be up to $31 million, just off of some restructures of a few players. This is not even everybody. So next, we have our cut candidates. So let me break these down real quick. Miles Jack is a cut candidate mainly because of his price tag. $8 million isn't all that much, but he came in with some lofty expectations from Jacksonville, and he just didn't really hit them this past season. He wasn't bad, but for the expectations we had, he just wasn't there. He could be cut, but in real life, I don't think he will be because of the lack of depth at that position that we don't have right now. I think right now, we'll get into the roster in a minute, but we only have the guy we drafted last year, Mark Robinson from Ole Miss, that is on the roster. So I just don't think that's a good idea right now. And then William Jackson, this is March 12th when I'm recording this, and I'm pretty sure he's already been cut. So if he has been, that's $12 million saved. But if not, he's pretty much a guarantee, $12 million saved. Mitch Trubisky. There have been a lot of rumors about him sticking around Pittsburgh. He kind of was the role of the veteran assistant to the young quarterback this last season, the mentor, if you will. But, $8 million for him to be a backup mentor, that's just not a reasonable amount. So without a restructure, he's going to have to be cut. Ahkello Witherspoon, he's been in a lot of cut conversations amongst Steelers and Steelers fans. I don't think he should be cut. I think when he's healthy, he's definitely our cornerback one, and it's not really that close. He plays very well when he's healthy, but that's just his issue. He just doesn't stay healthy. So, with that said, our cuts are going to end up being William Jackson and Mitch Trubisky, saving us $20.18 million. Ahkello Witherspoon, you could cut him, but to me, him and Levi Wallace both are on 1-year deals. So that after this season, they're free agents, and I just think at a $4 million price tag, there's no sense in cutting him. If he's healthy, great. He can play, and he'll probably be one of the better corners on the team. And if he's not healthy, it's only $4 million. It's not really a huge price tag. You're not sacrificing a whole lot financially. So I think it'll be a move that we can just maintain. So with all that done, just to clean up the roster a little bit, we still have 55 players on the roster, which is 2 more roster spots than the in-season roster allows. Our current cap space is about 51.5 million, and we saved over 56 million. So a lot of cleanup there, and not a whole lot of moves. So there's more that can even be done, but that's what we did. The current offensive depth chart of this team, this isn't fully like lined out, and this is not in order, but we only have one quarterback on the roster for cutting Mitch Trubisky and Mason Rudolph being a free agent. The running back room, Najee Harris, Anthony McFarland, Jalen Warren, I'm completely fine with that. That'll probably be our 3 going into the season unless we draft a running back as well. And then our tight end spot, we only have Freiermuth and Connor Hayward right now. Something's going to be changed there, but we'll get into that later. And then wide receiver, Deontay, George Pickens, Anthony Miller, Calvin Austin are the main guys. Those guys I think they're fine. Calvin Austin didn't play last year, so I think they still have to give him a chance. But, we'll see what it comes there. And then the offensive line, starters are James Daniels, Kevin Dotson, Dan Moore, Chukwuma Okorafor, and Mason Cole. The rest of them just fill out the roster. On the defensive side, you have Watt and Highsmith and Roche, the guy we drafted, I believe, a year or 2 ago, and he went to the Giants after we cut him. The interior D-line's an issue. Cam Hayward is about the only guy there that really has shown anything, and he's shown a lot, but everybody else is, at best, a mid-level player. And that's given a little bit of benefit to the fact as well. So then you have Miles Jack. He and Mark Robinson are the only guys who've really seen the field on the linebacker spot. So that's something that's got to be changed, I think. And then safeties, you've only got Minkah Fitzpatrick returning. Terrell Edmonds is a free agent. So Trey Norwood is a good rotational guy, but I just don't see him being a starter in this league. In the corners, you have Levi Wallace and Ahkello Witherspoon, but after that, that's a lot of practice squad. So that room's got to be fixed up as well. And then special teams, Boswell, Harvin, and Christian Kuntz. Those have been staples for some time now, and they're going to continue to stay that way. So with our re-signings, we're going to go ahead and get on those. Cam Sutton, we're going to re-sign him. He's going to be a main target. He was a very good corner this year. And an $8 million price tag is maybe him giving up a little bit, but I think that's something that the team and him could come to an agreement to for sure. He's been in Pittsburgh. He has really not had like multiple years of success. He's been good for just a couple years now, and before that he was a solid rotational player. But I think you just have to have Cam Sutton back. Larry Ogunjobi is another one. He played pretty decent this last year on the Steelers, and I think they can't afford to lose him with the lack of defensive line and depth that they have. So he'll come back for about the $6 million price tag. It could be a little more now that Brandon Graham re-signed with the Eagles for $6 million, and he's a bit older, so that could push Ogunjobi's number up to maybe 8 or 10. But we're gonna stick with him at this 6 number expectation for now. Terrell Edmonds at $6 million. He's been a very solid player. Not everybody on a team is going to be a superstar, and I think Terrell Edmonds fits the role of a guy who gets his job done and does it very well, and that's it. But that's all you need from a guy like him. You have Minkah Fitzpatrick, you have T.J. Watt and Cam Hayward on that defense, and Miles Jack when he can be himself. So I think Terrell Edmonds, $6 million, that's a good price tag for him. Zach Gentry, you kind of bringing him back because you're at a lack of depth right now, and honestly, I think he's a guy who'd want to come back. He's had all but good things in Pittsburgh for his career. They kind of built him up a little bit from what he was, not much coming in. And he's going to be a really cheap price tag, about $1 million, maybe a little more, 2 or 3 tops. But he's just kind of a guy you keep around just for the locker room. Derek Watt, probably the same now that JJ's retired as well. I really see Derek and TJ probably just sticking it out here as long as they can in Pittsburgh, barring something crazy. And then James Pierre, there was a lot of hype about him 2 or so years ago, and it turned out to be not a whole lot. James Pierre is a guy who, in the season, played the Raiders, and he pretty much locked up Devontae Adams that whole game, which is it's James Pierre. How in the world did he do that? I don't know. But James Pierre may not be the best corner, but you have to have depth, and a guy like him, he as a fourth corner behind Sutton, Wallace, and Witherspoon, I am all for that. So if you can get him around the $2 million price tag a year, I don't mind that at all. That's good for me. So signings. This will bring us to we have about 27 mil, I believe. And these are some key signings that I think we need to make. Javon Hargrave, former Pittsburgh Steeler, actually was on the Eagles these last couple years, and he had a really good year last year, having I believe 12 or 11 sacks this season. And I mean, that's insane coming from an interior D lineman. Um, he really is that dude. The Gravedigger needs to come back to Pittsburgh, and so I think that's a huge hole we have in our defense too. Is just the front. Other than Cam Hayward, there's nothing there. Previously, we had Cam Hayward, Stephon Tuitt, and Javon Hargrave, and that was great. We had so much success with that, so we need to build that back up. $10 million is probably going to be about his total. He's a little older. He's about 30, 31, so that's probably a solid number for him. And then Bud Dupree. It might be just it's not just the Steelers and me, I promise. This is a good fit. The Steelers need a rotational guy, and Bud Dupree got paid by Tennessee after leaving Pittsburgh. And great for him, but it really didn't work out there. So I think Bud Dupree's a guy who may look into coming back to Pittsburgh so he can build something back that he messed up, honestly. He's not going to be expensive at all. He really hasn't played games, so he can't command a whole lot of money. $2 million might be a little low. He might be around the 5-6 range, but I mean, his market's going to be weird. If there's just no offers for him, there's just no offers. So he's a guy who could come to Pittsburgh and sit behind Highsmith and TJ and be a really good guy to rotate in and give TJ and Highsmith some breaths whenever they need them. And then Tremaine Edmonds, middle linebacker, currently on the Buffalo Bills, but he's going to sit around that $10 million price range too. Been a really good middle linebacker in Buffalo, and obviously his brother Terrell is on this team already, and his other brother Trey has had some stints in Pittsburgh as well. Um, you know, it's a good storyline, and Pittsburgh obviously likes their storylines, bringing in Connor Hayward and whatnot. So I think if they can bring Terrell and Tremaine in, that's probably one of the best offseason moves they can do, whether it be with or without Javon Hargrave and Bud Dupree. I think this is a huge need for them in terms of some stability at that middle linebacker slot, and having Tremaine Edmonds and Miles Jack at the middle linebacker positions might be really crazy. Some people might look at this and say, why did you only sign some defensive players? Well, I think honestly the offense has a lot going for it, excuse me. But we already have our quarterback for the future for now. The receiving room is pretty good. I mean, I think it's been underrated in my opinion, honestly. Deontay Johnson is a very high-end number 2 receiver, I think. He's one of the hardest receivers to guard in the NFL just because of his elusiveness. And then George Pickens is that dude. We don't need a one because George Pickens is our one coming up soon. So, and then Calvin Austin, he's a question mark, but if he can play and play in that slot role that they really need right now, I think that'll be really dirty. And then you have a running back. Maybe you float somewhere out like for a tight end. I don't really know the market right now. I know like the high end Gesicki, Dalton Schultz, and all that, but that wouldn't be in Pittsburgh's market range anyways. They have Freiermuth. They don't need them. But the offensive line, they started off the beginning of the year iffy. But as they played all 17 games together, they really grew to be a solid unit. And sure, they need to upgrade that offensive line, but there's still the draft. We still have the draft to focus on. So I think through the offseason signings, you focus on defense. And if there's a guy in the offensive line, especially that falls to you and he isn't taking as much money as maybe you expect, then go for it. But I think these 3 guys are the ones that we should focus on in free agency at the moment. The NFL draft. This is exciting. Obviously, one of the most exciting parts of the offseason. Pick 17. We'll go ahead and just jump into this. I'm going to have the Steelers taking Broderick Jones. I think Skoronski and Paris Johnson are both going to be off the board at this point. And if they're not, and maybe Broderick Jones is, you take whichever one's available. You take whichever one you like more. The left tackle spot, Dan Moore had some severe issues at the end of through the year. The end of the year did get better for him, but there's just a ceiling there, I think. And guys like Broderick Jones or Paris Johnson and Peter Skoronski, the ceilings are 7 times as high. So I mean, go get a legit bookend like franchise left tackle for your young quarterback. Um, so that's where I stand first. Broderick Jones is my expectation, and then Emmanuel Forbes. Dude ran a really fast 40, which the 40 isn't everything, but he kind of shocked with that. He's pretty light, but he's a good size overall, like height wise, and he's a ball hawk from Mississippi State. So he's a guy that I really think the Steelers could use and maybe could let develop a little bit for a year, playing with a good group of corners, getting some rotational time with Sutton and Witherspoon and Wallace, but not just shoving them out there in the fire immediately. And then John Michael Schmitz, center from Minnesota. Mason Cole was good this year, but I think an upgrade there would be great for sure. Like I said, he was fine, but if you can move and get that 249 and have John Michael Schmitz here, he's the best center in this class. There's no reason to pass up on that and start, lowering the age of this offensive line, so that way this offensive line can be together for 15 years if you can make it happen that way. DeMarvion Overshone from Texas at the 3rd round. Like I said before, the Steelers need some depth in the linebacker room, and right now, obviously, they've brought in Tremaine Edmonds and they have Miles Jack, but Miles Jack, he underperformed this last year, so Marvion Overshone can be a guy who, if after this year, Miles Jack's contract's up, so if Jack doesn't prove himself worth it, then you have DeMarvion Overshone waiting in the shadows to take over, along with Mark Robinson sitting around waiting for you. Then Bryce Ford Wheaton tested really well at the combine. A guy who nobody really expected to test as good as he did, but he did. And the Steelers. Some people think they might need to make some moves in that wide receiver room in free agency or early in the draft, and I disagree. Free agency, there's just not a guy that is going to want as little money as the Steelers are going to need to spend in their wide receiver room right now and be the kind of receiver they need. If they're going to get a vet, it needs to be a guy like the mentality of a Jarvis Landry who can really teach these young guys, but I don't think they're going to be able to get that. So why not just kind of add on some depth in that room with a guy like Bryce Ford Wheaton? And then the Steelers do not have a 5th or 6th rounder, so going to the 7th round, they have 2 picks. First pick in the 7th round will be Clayton Tune. Like I said before with the quarterbacks, we have 1 right now, and you need usually 2 or 3. They can, they might target a guy like Clayton Tune from Houston. He was at the Senior Bowl, I believe, and the Combine, and was pretty decent, but he's still going to be in that back end of the draft. He's not going to be great. So get a guy who can just be a long-term backup to Kenny, help him out there. And then maybe find another guy later in the undrafted rounds or something like that. And then I wasn't going to take this guy, but Demario Douglas is another guy who from the Combine did really well for himself at the Combine, and he's from Liberty. I wasn't expecting to take another wide receiver, but looking at the board when I was running my mock drafts a few times, he was the only guy that left I was just comfortable with taking at this spot. So, you've got, with that said, you can use that. Receivers, obviously, they can come from anywhere and be pretty solid. So, I think, that just gives you some help from that position. Like earlier you saw when the depth chart was up on the screen, you had guys like Cody White and Gunnar Olszewski, and you can replace these guys with Ford Wheaton and Demario Douglas pretty well, I think. So it gives you some fresh legs, some more depth, some youth in that room. Even though they're already really young, it just gives you the ability to have more guys who can step up sooner if they need to. So with that said, that's pretty much the offseason. Looking at our roster, we're going to have, obviously, Pickett as quarterback 1, Najee Harris in the backfield, and then the receivers being Johnson, Pickens, and Austin, I think you'll start the year with, and then Pat Freiermuth at tight end. That offensive line, to me, looks pretty dang scary. You'll have Broderick Jones on your left side, Kevin Dotson, John Michael Schmitz, James Daniels, and Chukwuma Okorafor. And the right tackle spot could definitely be a spot up for grabs between Okorafor and Moore. Okorafor is another guy who could be cut or could be restructured. So if he doesn't play enough well through the preseason, he's a guy who could be replaced by Dan Moore pretty quickly and effectively. Dan Moore isn't bad. There needs to be an upgrade, and Roger Jones can do that. And then Kevin Dotson, he might be in a bit of a fight for his spot too. Mason Cole's played guard before. That's actually where he played most of his NFL career at, other than, I believe, the last 2 seasons with Pittsburgh and then Minnesota. Um, Mason Cole and Kendrick Green are both at the guard position that they can potentially fight for Kevin Dotson's spot. And I think that'd be really good for the Steelers to put all these guys together who may or may not just be able to, fight for a spot and work in themselves. Um, and then down here at the bottom, you can see some like the rotational guys who would definitely play. Connor Hayward, Jalen Warren, Bryce Ford Wheaton, and Demario Douglas probably would all get time. So to me, that offense is pretty good. A second-year Kenny Pickett coming in, being a little bit more comfortable this year would be great. Deontay Johnson, a very elusive receiver, one of the hardest to guard in the league. And then a guy like George Pickens, who you just throw the ball in the air and he's going to go get it. Pat Frymuth's becoming a very good tight end very quickly. So I think this is a pretty comfortable spot for Pittsburgh to be in. So moving on to the defense, the front seven, you have Alex Highsmith, Cam Hayward, Javon Hargrave, and TJ Watt on that front line. Kind of a reunion there, and that's pretty cool. Don't forget about Larry Ogunjobi and Bud Dupree as some rotational help as well. Then in the linebacker spot, you have Miles Jack and Tremaine Edmonds. You also have DeMarvion Overshown, but that duo right there, if Miles Jack can play like the Miles Jack in Jacksonville, then this defense is going to be scary, like truly scary. In the cornerback room, Levi Wallace, Ahkello Witherspoon, and Cameron Sutton. That's 3 solid corners. When they're all healthy, they might all be, upper end CB2s. I don't think any of those guys is a CB1, and that's kind of your reason to draft a corner. But get a real CB1 and some replacement for when guys like Wallace and Witherspoon potentially could be gone this next year. But right now, as it stands, I think that's a really good room. And then you add in the James Pierre and Emmanuel Forbes, and Trey Norwood can even split some time in the nickel. That's very helpful, honestly. And then the safeties being Terrell and Minkah Fitzpatrick. I mean, that's worked for some time now. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I think that's just a great way to finish this. So with this all said, I think the Steelers would end up being probably a playoff team. I don't think the Steelers, like I said, can be a contender, a true contender this upcoming season. I don't expect that from them. But they can definitely be a playoff team. There's a lot of tough teams in the AFC, but building a defense this good and this solid, and then having a young offense like that, if they can get together and really just grow up in an offense together for years and years to come, the Steelers could be a dynasty again very soon. And like I said, this is the best case scenario for this specific offseason. It doesn't mean the most wild way that they're going to be able to win. It's the most realistic but best case scenario for them to be a very good team fast. And so, yeah, with that said, I think that's going to be the end of this video. Thank you for watching. And, like I said before, if you have any other teams, if you like this video, have any other teams you want to see rebuilt, let me know in the comments. I'll be glad to do those as well. Follow me on Twitter. It's Shredder, my tag everywhere, Shredder and Twitter. Posting a lot of NFL content on there. But yeah, thank you all for watching, and peace.